Welcome, Good Shepherd families. This is the story of the Great Family. The story of the Great Family takes place in the desert, like many of the stories of the people of God. This is just a little piece of the desert here in our Godly Playroom. Many important things happen in the desert, so it's important to know what the desert is like. The desert is a dangerous place. There's very little water, so it's hard for plants and animals and people to survive. The desert is hot during the day and cool at night. When the wind blows, the sand will scratch the skin, so people wear special clothing. The wind will change the shape of the desert, so people often lose their way. People do not go into the desert unless they really have to. After the flood, all of the creatures of the earth began to fill the earth with new life again. They began to live near two great ancient rivers. In time, villages and towns and cities began to grow. There were two important ancient cities, Ur and Haran. At this time, people believed that there were many gods, such as God of the wind, God of the stars, God of the clouds, God of the plants, God of the animals. They believed that the world was alive with many gods. There was one family in particular who believed that there was one God and that all of God was in everything. Abram and Sarai were part of this family. They believed this, but they weren't sure if it was actually true. They decided to go on a journey to Haran. They traveled by day along the Euphrates River, and at night they would camp along its bank. They brought their family members and their animals. And the river gave them water to drink, and it guided them along their journey. They knew they were getting close when they saw travelers coming out from Haran. They finally arrived. Often, Abram liked to go out into the desert at night to look at the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the desert. One night, when Abram was out in the desert, God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God, that Abram knew what God wanted him to do. God wanted Abram to journey on toward Canaan and leave Haran. So soon after, Abram and Sarai packed up their things, and they took some family members with them, including Abram's nephew Lot. So they first traveled to Shechem. They went up a hill there, and they prayed. And they knew that God was in this place. So they built an altar to mark this place, and also to give thanks that God was with them on their journey. God did not want them to stay here, so they journeyed on. they went to Bethel, and again they prayed. And they knew that God was in this place, that God was just not here or there, but that God was everywhere and in everything. So they built an altar to give thanks that God was in this place and to give thanks that God was with them on their journey. But God did not want them to stay here, so they journeyed on. They finally came to Hebron, and this is where they pitched their tents near the oaks of Mamre. They knew that this was where God wanted them to be. God called Abram out into the desert one night. And God came so close to Abram, and Abram came so close to God that Abram knew what God was saying. God told Abram that he would have a great family, and that he would be the father of a great family, and that his wife Sarai would be the mother of this great family. Now, Abram thought this was impossible because he had many years and was old. But God said it would be so. God asked Abram to change his name from Abram to Abraham, and Sarai to change her name from Sarai to Sarah. Time passed, and Abraham and Sarah had no children. Soon after, 3 strangers traveled from Haran to Hebron, and they greeted Abraham. As was custom, Abraham invited these strangers in for a meal. Sarah, being a generous person, took 3 measures of flour and made an abundant meal for these 3 strangers. During this meal, the 3 strangers told Abraham and Sarah that they would have a son. Both of them just laughed. They thought, "We are so old, we cannot have a son." Later that evening, the strangers went back. And do you know what happened? Shortly thereafter, Abraham and Sarah had a child. And when this child was born, they laughed. And they named their child Isaac, which in their language meant laughter. Isaac grew into a fine young man. And Sarah was growing older in years. And she soon died. And Isaac and Abraham buried her in the caves beneath the oaks of Mamre. Now, Abraham was very sad and very lonely, but he knew that he had one more thing to do before he died. He wanted to find a wife for his son Isaac. So he sent one of his helpers to Haran. And when this helper arrived, he met a nice young woman named Rebecca at the well. Rebecca gave him and his animals water to drink and invited him to have dinner with her family. So during this dinner, Abraham's helper told Rebecca's family about Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and the great family. And Rebecca wanted to be part of this family. Rebecca was as courageous as she was kind. So she made the journey herself to Hebron. When Isaac saw Rebekah, he greeted her, and shortly thereafter they were married. Abraham, old in years and full of life, he died, and he was buried in the caves next to Sarah, underneath the oaks of Mamre. Isaac and Rebekah had children, and their children grew up and had children. And this went on for generations and generations. And then your grandparents grew up and had children. And those children grew up and had children, and you were born. And you are part of this family, as many as the stars in the sky, and as many as the grains of sand in the desert. Now, I wonder, what part of the story did you like the best? And I wonder, is there any part of the story that we could leave out and still have all that we need? I wonder, where are you in this story? What part of this story is about you?